Imagine a world where Rome trembles at the mention of one name, Attila the Hun. This isn't Hollywood fiction, but the tale of a nomadic horseman who reshaped European history. What can we learn from the Scourge of God? How did he nearly topple the mightiest empire of his time? By the video's end, you'll understand how one man's ambition changed a continent, gaining insights into leadership and power that resonate today. Ready to uncover the secrets of history's most fearsome conqueror? Hit subscribe, and let's dive into the extraordinary life of Attila the Hun. The rise of Attila and the Hun Empire. The story of Attila begins not with the man himself, but with the people who would become his followers, the Huns. Picture yourself on the vast, wind-swept steppes of Central Asia. The horizon stretches endlessly in every direction, broken only by the occasional herd of wild horses or the silhouette of a soaring eagle. This harsh, unforgiving landscape was the cradle of one of history's most feared warrior cultures. The Huns were nomads, masters of the horse and bow. Their lifestyle was alien to the settled peoples they would later conquer. Imagine living your entire life on horseback, your home a felt tent that could be packed up and moved at a moment's notice. This mobility wasn't just a way of life, it was a military advantage that would shake the foundations of empires. But how did these scattered tribes become a force that would make Rome itself tremble? The answer lies in their unique culture and way of life. Unlike the settled societies they would later conquer, the Huns were adaptable, ruthlessly efficient, and unencumbered by the trappings of civilization. Think about your own life for a moment. How often have you felt stuck, weighed down by routines and expectations? The Huns' nomadic lifestyle offers us a powerful lesson in flexibility. Just as they could pack up their entire society and move at a moment's notice, we too can benefit from being ready to adapt when circumstances demand it. The rise of the Hun Empire wasn't just about military might. It was about a people who turned their perceived weaknesses into strengths. Their lack of permanent settlements, once seen as a mark of barbarism, became the key to their success. They could strike quickly, vanish into the steppes, and reappear where least expected. As the 4th century AD dawned, the Huns began to coalesce into a more unified force. They moved westward, absorbing or displacing other nomadic tribes in their path. Their reputation grew with each victory, and soon the mere rumor of Hun movement was enough to send other peoples fleeing in terror. By the time Attila was born, around 406 AD dawned, the Huns had established a loose confederacy that stretched from the Caspian Sea to the Danube River. They were no longer just scattered tribes, but a rising power poised on the edge of the Roman world. This was the world Attila was born into, a world of constant movement, of battle and conquest, where power was measured in horses, warriors, and the ability to inspire fear in one's enemies. It was a world that would shape him into the leader who would nearly bring Rome to its knees. As we reflect on the rise of the Hun Empire, consider how their story might apply to your own life. Are there areas where you've become too settled, too inflexible? Could you benefit from adopting some of the Huns' adaptability? Remember, in a world of constant change, sometimes the greatest strength lies in the ability to move quickly and decisively. The stage is now set for the emergence of Attila himself. The Huns have risen from obscure nomads to a force that commands respect and fear. But it would take the ambition and cunning of one extraordinary leader to forge them into an empire that would challenge the mightiest power of the age. Attila's early life and ascension to power. Imagine being born into a world where the clash of swords and the thunder of hooves are as common as birdsong. This was Attila's reality. Born around 406 AD, he entered a society where leadership was earned through strength, cunning, and the ability to command loyalty. From his earliest years, Attila was groomed for power. He and his brother Bleda were raised to take over from their uncle, Ruga, who ruled the HUNNIC Confederation. Picture a young Attila, learning to ride before he could walk, mastering the recurve bow that was the Hun's signature weapon. But his education went beyond warfare. He was taught the intricacies of tribal politics, the art of negotiation, and the importance of building alliances. Attila's childhood wasn't spent in a palace, but in the saddle. The Hun's nomadic lifestyle meant that he grew up constantly on the move, exposed to different cultures and ways of thinking. This early exposure to diversity would later serve him well as he built his multi-ethnic empire. Think about your own upbringing. How have your early experiences shaped your approach to leadership and problem-solving? Like Attila, we are all products of our environment, but it's what we do with those experiences that defines us. As Attila grew into manhood, he began to make a name for himself. Roman historians, while biased, paint a picture of a man of extraordinary charisma and ambition. He was said to be able to inspire loyalty in his followers and strike terror into the hearts of his enemies. In 434 AD, Attila's uncle Ruga died, leaving Attila and his brother Bleda as joint rulers of the Huns. This dual kingship was not uncommon among steppe peoples, but it was clear from the start that Attila was the dominant partner. For a decade, the brothers ruled together, expanding Hun influence and extracting ever larger tributes from the Roman Empire. But Attila was not content to share power. In 445 AD, Bleda died under mysterious circumstances. Some sources suggest he was assassinated on Attila's orders. While we can't know for certain, what's clear is that Attila emerged as the sole ruler of the Huns, now at the height of their power. This moment in Attila's life raises important questions about ambition and the lengths one might go to achieve their goals. While we certainly don't advocate fratricide, Attila's single-minded pursuit of power is a stark reminder of the importance of focus and determination in achieving our objectives. With Bleda gone, Attila turned his full attention to expansion. He reorganized the HUNNIC forces, consolidating his power and preparing for the campaigns that would earn him the title Scourge of God. As we consider Attila's rise to power, think about your own path to success. Are there areas where you need to be more focused, more determined? Attila's story shows us that great achievements often require unwavering commitment and the willingness to seize opportunities when they arise. Attila's early life and ascension to power set the stage for the dramatic events that would follow. He had transformed himself from a prince of a nomadic confederation into the sole ruler of an empire poised to challenge Rome itself. The world was about to learn just how formidable a leader Attila had become. The HUNNIC culture and warfare. Imagine a society where the horse isn't just a means of transportation, but an extension of the warrior himself. This was the world of the Huns. From birth, HUNNIC children were raised in the saddle, forming a bond with their mounts that seemed supernatural to their enemies. The cornerstone of HUNNIC warfare was the mounted archer. Picture a Hun warrior, short and stocky, perfectly built for. In his hands is the recurve bow, a weapon of devastating power and accuracy. What made the Huns truly terrifying was their ability to shoot with deadly precision while riding at full gallop, a skill that seemed almost magical to their opponents. Think about your own skills. What abilities have you honed to such a degree that they appear? The Huns' mastery of mounted archery reminds us of the power of dedicated practice and the advantage of excelling in a unique skill. But HUNNIC warfare wasn't just about individual skill. Their tactics were revolutionary. They would approach an enemy force in a loose formation, showering them with arrows from a distance. As the enemy tried to close in, the Huns would feign retreat, only to wheel around and attack again. This hit-and-run strategy demoralized their foes and made it nearly impossible for slower, heavily armored opponents to engage them effectively. The Huns also excelled at siege warfare. Despite their nomadic origins, they learned to use Roman siege engines, often employing captured engineers to build and operate them. This adaptability, the willingness to learn and use the tools of their enemies, was a key factor in their success. HUNNIC culture was built around warfare, but it wasn't only about fighting. They were skilled diplomats and negotiators. Attila himself was known for his ability to play his enemies against each other, building a network of alliances and vassals that extended his power far beyond the reach of his army. The Huns were also accomplished craftsmen, particularly in metalwork. Their gold jewelry and weaponry were highly prized. This artistic side of Hunnic culture is often overlooked, but it reminds us that even the most feared warriors have depths we might not expect. Religion played a complex role in Hunnic society. They were largely shamanistic, believing in a spirit world that could be accessed through ritual and sacrifice. Attila himself was said to possess a sacred sword of the war god, which legitimized his rule in the eyes of his people. Consider how beliefs shape your own life and decisions. The Huns' spiritual worldview was integral to their identity and their military success. It gave them a sense of destiny and divine favor that bolstered their courage in battle. The Hunnic lifestyle was harsh by the standards of settled peoples. They lived in felt tents called yurts, ate mainly meat and dairy, and wore clothing made from animal skins. Yet this seemingly primitive lifestyle gave them incredible mobility and resilience. In your own life, are there comforts you might sacrifice for greater flexibility or resilience? The Huns remind us that sometimes what looks like deprivation can actually be a source of strength. Perhaps the most feared aspect of Hunnic culture was their reputation for brutality. While often exaggerated by their enemies, the Huns did use terror as a weapon. Cities would surrender at the mere rumor of their approach, having heard tales of the fate that befell those who resisted. As we reflect on Hunnic culture and warfare, we see a society perfectly adapted to conquest. Their mobility, their skill in mounted archery, their adaptability, and their fearsome reputation all combined to make them the most formidable fighting force of their time. Attila took these cultural strengths and forged them into an empire. Under his leadership, the Huns would move from being mere raiders to threatening the existence of Rome itself. Attila's conquests and expansion. By 445 AD, Attila stood as the sole ruler of the Hunnic Empire, his power unchallenged from within. Now, he turned his gaze outward, to the rich lands of the Roman Empire. Imagine the anticipation, the mixture of fear and excitement, as Attila gathered his forces for what would become a series of campaigns that would shake the foundations of the ancient world. Attila's first major target was the Eastern Roman Empire, centered in Constantinople. In 447 AD, he launched a devastating invasion of the Balkans. Picture the scene: waves of Hun cavalry sweeping across the landscape, their approach heralded by terrified refugees fleeing before them. Cities fell, armies were scattered, and the very earth seemed to tremble under the hooves of Hunnic horses. The Eastern Romans, caught off guard by the ferocity and speed of the Hun attack, sued for peace. Attila, showing his shrewd diplomatic skills, extracted an enormous tribute, 2,100 pounds of gold annually. This wasn't just about wealth. It was a humiliation for the Romans and a clear demonstration of Hun power. Think about your own negotiations in life. How often do you push for total victory? And when do you recognize the value of a profitable? Attila's success in extracting tribute shows us the importance of knowing when to press an advantage and when to consolidate gains. But Attila wasn't content with tribute alone. In 451 AD, he turned his attention westward, launching a massive invasion of Gaul, modern-day France. This campaign would lead to one of the most decisive battles in European history, the Battle of the Catalaunian Plains. Attila's army was a multi-ethnic force, a testament to his ability to build alliances and inspire loyalty across cultural lines. Alongside his Hunnic corps were Ostrogoths, Gepids, Franks, and others. As they advanced into Gaul, city after city fell before them. However, Attila faced a worthy opponent in Flavius Aetius, a Roman general who had once lived among the Huns and understood their Aetius formed an alliance with the Visigoths and other Germanic tribes, creating a coalition to stand against the Hunnic invasion. The two armies met on the Catalaunian plains in a battle of epic proportions. Imagine the clash of these titanic forces, the thundering charge of Hun cavalry, the disciplined ranks of Roman infantry, the air darkened by clouds of arrows. The fighting was fierce, and the casualties enormous on both sides. While the battle is often described as a defeat for Attila, the reality was more complex. He withdrew from the field, but his army remained largely intact. More importantly, he had demonstrated that he could challenge Rome on its own territory, a psychological victory that would have far-reaching consequences. Undeterred by this setback, Attila invaded Italy the very next year. The Western Roman Empire, already weakened by decades of decline, seemed on the brink of collapse. Attila's forces swept down the Italian peninsula, sacking cities and spreading terror. It was at this moment of crisis that one of history's most famous encounters occurred. Pope Leo the Hun met Attila near the gates of Rome itself. What transpired between them is lost to history, but the result was clear. Attila turned back, sparing Rome from his army's depredations. This moment illustrates Attila's complexity as a leader. Was he swayed by the Pope's eloquence? Did he fear divine retribution? Or were there more practical considerations, such as disease in his army or the approach of Eastern Roman forces? Whatever the reason, it shows that even at the height of his power, Attila was capable of restraint and strategic withdrawal. As we reflect on Attila's conquests, consider the lessons for our own lives. His success came not just from military might, but from a combination of strategic thinking, adaptability, and an understanding of when to push forward and when to pull back. In your own pursuits, how can you balance aggression with wisdom, knowing when to charge ahead and when to regroup? Attila's campaigns redrew the map of Europe and accelerated the decline of the Roman Empire. He had taken a coalition of nomadic tribes and forged them into a force that could challenge the greatest power of the age. But as with all empires, the seeds of decline were already being sown. The Battle of the Catalaunian Plains. The year is 451 AD. Attila's vast army, numbering perhaps 200,000 warriors, has swept across the Rhine and deep into Gaul. Cities have fallen, armies scattered, and the very foundations of Roman power in the West seem to be crumbling. But now, on the plains of Catalonia in modern-day France, Attila faces his greatest challenge. Imagine the scene as dawn breaks on the day of battle. A vast plain stretches before you, the morning mist slowly lifting to reveal two enormous armies facing each other. On one side, Attila's HUNNIC force, a diverse coalition of Huns, Ostrogoths, Gepids, and other Germanic and Slavic tribes. On the other, the Roman coalition led by Flavius Aetius, comprising Roman legions, Visigoths, Alans, and Franks. The air is thick with tension. The jingle of harnesses, the stamp of horses, hooves, and the low murmur of men preparing for battle create a symphony of impending conflict. This is not just a clash of armies, but a collision of worlds, the nomadic warrior culture of the steppes versus the settled civilization of Rome and its allies. As a leader, consider how you would feel in Attila's position. The weight of expectation from your followers, the knowledge that your reputation for invincibility is at stake. How do you inspire your diverse coalition to fight as one? Attila's challenge here mirrors the modern leader's task of uniting different teams or departments towards a common goal. The battle begins with a struggle for high ground, a small hill that could provide a tactical advantage. The fighting is fierce, with casualties mounting on both sides. Imagine the chaos of hand-to-hand combat, the thunder of cavalry charges, the air thick with arrows and the cries of the wounded. As the day wears on, the battle hangs in the balance. Then comes a crucial moment. The Visigothic king, Theodoric the Frere, is killed in the fighting. In many battles, the death of a king would signal defeat. But here, it has the opposite effect. The Visigoths, enraged by their king's death, fight with renewed fury. This turn of events offers a powerful lesson in leadership and motivation. Sometimes, what seems like a setback can become a rallying point, a source of strength and determination. In your own life and work, how can you turn obstacles into opportunities, setbacks into sources of motivation? As night falls, the fighting continues under the light of the moon. The casualties are immense, with some ancient sources claiming up to 300,000 dead, though modern historians suggest lower figures. The field is littered with the fallen, the ground soaked with blood. By morning, it's clear that while Attila hasn't been decisively defeated, he can't claim victory either. For the first time, his aura of invincibility has been challenged. He withdraws to his camp, using his famed wagon fort for protection. Aetius, perhaps wary of driving Attila to desperation or possibly concerned about upsetting the balance of power if the Huns were entirely defeated, does not pursue. This decision, criticized by some, shows the complex political calculations at play even in the midst of existential battles. As a leader, have you faced situations where achieving total victory might have unintended consequences? Aetius's decision reminds us that sometimes strategic restraint can be as important as aggressive action. The Battle of the Catalaunian Plains was a turning point, not just for Attila, but for Europe. It showed that the Huns could be stopped, that the cooperation of Romans and barbarians could create a force capable of standing against the most feared army of the age. For Attila, while not a decisive defeat, it marked the beginning of the end of his expansion westward. Yet, true to his indomitable nature, he would invade Italy the very next year, proving that even in the face of setbacks, his ambition and determination remained undiminished. As we reflect on this monumental battle, consider its lessons for our own lives. The importance of coalition building, the power of determination in the face of setbacks, the strategic choice between pressing an advantage and showing restraint. All these have relevance far beyond the battlefield. The Battle of the Catalaunian Plains didn't end Attila's career, but it changed the course of his conquests and possibly saved Western European civilization as it then existed. It stands as a testament to the idea that even the mightiest can be challenged when people unite against a common threat. Attila's impact on the Roman Empire. Imagine yourself in Rome in the mid-5th century AD, the Eternal City, once the unchallenged mistress of the Mediterranean world, now trembles at the mention of a single name, Attila. The impact of this nomadic leader from the distant steppes on the Roman Empire was profound and multifaceted, accelerating processes of decay that had been underway for centuries. First, consider the immediate, tangible effects of Attila's campaigns. The Eastern Roman Empire, while avoiding outright conquest, was bled dry by the massive tributes Attila extracted. Picture convoys of wagons groaning under the weight of gold, silver, and precious goods, all flowing from the coffers of Constantinople into Attila's camps. This drain on resources weakened the empire's ability to defend itself and maintain its complex administrative systems. In the West, the impact was even more severe. Attila's invasions of Gaul and Italy left a trail of destroyed cities, ravaged countryside, and displaced populations. Imagine once prosperous Roman towns reduced to smoking ruins, their inhabitants fled or enslaved. These material losses were staggering, but the psychological impact was perhaps even greater. Think about a time when you faced a seemingly unstoppable force in your own life. How did it affect your confidence, your planning, your very way of thinking? For the Romans, Attila embodied their worst fears, the unstoppable barbarian at the gates, the divine punishment for their sins. This fear accelerated the loss of confidence that had been eroding Roman power for generations. Attila's campaigns also forced the Romans to rely increasingly on Germanic allies, particularly in the west. The Battle of the Catalaunian Plains, while a check on Attila's advance, demonstrated that Rome could no longer defend itself without significant barbarian help. This reliance would have long-lasting consequences, eventually leading to the deposition of the last Western Roman emperor by his Germanic commander, Odoacer, in 476 AD. But Attila's impact wasn't entirely negative from the Roman perspective. His invasions forced the empire to adapt, to develop new strategies and alliances. In a way, he reinvigorated a decaying system, even if that reinvigoration ultimately led to its transformation. It's a reminder that challenges, even existential ones, can sometimes spur innovation and renewal. Consider your own life or organization. Are there areas where you've become complacent? Sometimes, like the Romans facing Attila, we need to confront our greatest fears to find new strengths within ourselves. Attila's campaigns also had long-lasting effects on the demographic and political landscape of Europe. His invasions set in motion population movements that would reshape the continent. As people fled before the Huns, they pushed into Roman territory, setting the stage for the migration period that would define the early Middle Ages. Moreover, Attila's empire, while short-lived, provided a model for later nomadic confederations. It demonstrated that a leader of sufficient charisma and military skill could unite diverse peoples into a force capable of challenging even the mightiest sedentary empires. In the religious sphere, Attila's onslaught was seen by many Christians as divine punishment, strengthening the church's influence as people turned to faith in times of crisis. The famous meeting between Attila and Pope Leo XIV, whether historical fact or later legend, symbolizes the growing power of the papacy in the vacuum left by imperial retreat. As we reflect on Attila's impact on the Roman Empire, we see a classic example of how a single dynamic force can accelerate historical processes already in motion. The Roman Empire had been declining for centuries, but Attila's campaigns brought many of its long-standing issues to a head. In your own life, have you encountered catalysts that rapidly accelerated changes that were already underway? Attila's story reminds us that sometimes external pressures can bring simmering issues to the boil, forcing us to confront and adapt to new realities. Ultimately, while Attila didn't single-handedly bring down the Roman Empire, his campaigns were a crucial factor in its transformation. He hastened the end of the classical world and helped set the stage for the medieval era that would follow. The legend of the Scourge of God. Imagine a name so terrifying that its mere whisper could empty cities and topple kingdoms. This was Attila, the Scourge of God. But how did a man, mortal like any other, come to be seen as an instrument of divine wrath? The title, Scourge of God, Flagellum Dei in Latin, encapsulates the mix of terror and awe that Attila inspired. Picture yourself as a Roman citizen, hearing tales of an unstoppable force sweeping out of the east. Stories spread of a leader so fierce that grass never grew where his horse had trod, of an army so vast it drank rivers dry. In the face of such terror, many turned to religious explanations. For many Christians in the Roman Empire, Attila's devastation was seen as divine punishment for their sins. Imagine the psychological impact of believing that your enemy was sent by God himself. This belief didn't just explain Attila's success, it made resistance seem futile. After all, how could one fight against God's will? Attila, shrewd leader that he was, did not shy away from this fearsome reputation. In fact, he cultivated it. Think about your own personal brand. How do you present yourself to the world? Attila understood the power of perception and used his reputation as a weapon as effective as any sword or bow. One famous story tells of Attila finding a rusty old sword and declaring it the sword of Mars, the Roman god of war. Whether Attila truly believed this or simply used it as a propaganda tool, it added a divine sanction to his rule in the eyes of his followers and struck fear into the hearts of his enemies. The Scourge of God narrative reached its apex in Attila's encounter with Pope Leo XIV in 452 AD. Attila was poised to sack Rome itself, but after meeting with the Pope, he turned his army around. Later Christian legends claimed Attila saw a vision of Saint Peter threatening him if he attacked Rome. While likely apocryphal, this story illustrates how Attila's legend intertwined with religious narratives. Consider a time when you faced a formidable opponent or challenge. How did your perception of them affect your actions? The Romans. Belief in Attila as a divine scourge often led to paralyzing fear or desperate capitulation, demonstrating the real-world power of legends and perceptions. But Attila's legend didn't end with his death in 453 AD. In fact, it grew and transformed over the centuries. In some traditions, particularly Germanic ones, Attila was remembered not as a scourge, but as a great and just ruler. The Norse saga ATTILA'S portrays him as a tragic hero, while the German Nibelungenlied depicts him as a generous host. This evolution of Attila's legend reminds us that history is often shaped by those who tell the stories, can be reinterpreted and reimagined. Interestingly, in his homeland of Hungary, Attila is often seen as a national hero. Many Hungarians proudly claim descent from the Huns, with Attila viewed as a great conqueror and founder of nations. This positive spin on Attila's legacy stands in stark contrast to his portrayal in much of Western Europe. The legend of Attila has persisted into modern times, appearing in books, operas, films, and even video games. His name has become synonymous with ruthless conquest and barbaric power. Yet, this enduring fascination also speaks to Attila's complexity as a historical figure. A brilliant military strategist, a cunning diplomat, and a leader capable of uniting diverse peoples under his banner. As we reflect on the legend of the Scourge of God, consider the power of narrative in shaping perceptions and actions. Attila's fearsome reputation was perhaps his most potent weapon, allowing him to conquer as much through terror as through actual military might. Legend reminds us of the importance of managing our reputation and understanding how others see us. Ultimately, the legend of Attila, the Scourge of God, tells us as much about the fears, beliefs, and values of those who told and retold his story as it does about the man himself. It's a testament to the enduring power of myths and legends to shape our understanding of history and ourselves. Attila's death and the fall of the Hun Empire. Imagine the HUNNIC Empire at its zenith. Vast swathes of Europe trembled at Attila's name, and 2 Roman empires paid him tribute. Now picture the shocking swiftness of its collapse. This is the story we're about to explore. The year is 453 AD. Attila, at the height of his power, has just taken a new, young bride named Ildiko. Picture the scene. A grand feast to celebrate the wedding, with Attila surrounded by his chieftains, reveling in his success and perhaps planning his next conquest. But fate had other plans. The morning after the wedding, Attila's guards, concerned by his unusual absence, broke into his chamber. They found a scene that would change the course of history. Attila lay dead in his bed, with a distraught Ildiko weeping beside him. The cause of Attila's death remains a mystery to this day. Some sources suggest he died of a nosebleed, choking on his own blood in his drunken sleep. Others hint at foul play, perhaps assassination by a rival or even by his new bride. The truth is, we may never know. Think about how sudden changes can upend even the most stable situations in your own life. Attila's unexpected death is a stark reminder of how quickly fortunes can change, and how important it is to have systems in place that can withstand the loss of a key figure. The impact of Attila's death was immediate and far-reaching. The HUNNIC Empire, built on the force of his personality and military genius, began to unravel almost instantly. His sons, Elak, Dengizic, and Ernak, fought amongst themselves for control, weakening the empire from within. Imagine the chaos and uncertainty that must have gripped the HUNNIC lands. Chieftains who had been kept in check by Attila's iron will now saw opportunities to assert their independence. subject peoples, long restive under HUNNIC rule, began to rebel. The collapse accelerated in 454 AD at the Battle of Nidau. Attila's eldest son, Ellac, faced a coalition of Germanic tribes led by the Gepids. In a reversal of fortune that must have seemed unthinkable just a year earlier, the Huns were decisively defeated, and Ellac himself was killed. This defeat broke the back of HUNNIC power. Think about times in your own life when a single setback has caused a cascade of further problems. The Battle of Nidau was such a moment for the HUNNIC Empire, unraveling years of conquest in a single day. By 469 AD, just 16 years after Attila's death, the last remnants of HUNNIC power in Europe had vanished. The empire that had made Rome tremble was no more, its people scattered or absorbed into other groups. The swift fall of the HUNNIC Empire offers us several important lessons. First, it demonstrates the dangers of building an empire around a single, charismatic leader. Attila's personal qualities, his military genius, his ability to inspire loyalty and fear were the glue that held his diverse empire together. Without him, it lacked cohesion. Consider your own organization or projects. Are they overly dependent on any one person? Attila's death and the subsequent collapse of his empire remind us of the importance of creating sustainable systems that can outlast any individual. Secondly, the fall of the Huns shows us how quickly power can shift in times of uncertainty. The same subject peoples who had trembled at Attila's name were quick to assert their independence once he was gone. In your own life, how do you prepare for sudden changes or power vacuums? Lastly, the collapse of the HUNNIC Empire had far-reaching consequences for Europe. The power vacuum left by the Huns allowed other groups to rise to prominence, setting the stage for the political landscape of the early Middle Ages. The Ostrogoths, Gepids, and others who had been under HUNNIC dominion now became powers in their own right. As we reflect on the fall of Attila's empire, we're reminded of the impermanence of power. Attila, the scourge of God, who had seemed invincible in life, left behind an empire that crumbled to dust in less than 2 decades after his death. Yet, while his empire didn't outlive him, Attila's impact on history was undeniable. He hastened the fall of the Western Roman Empire, set in motion population movements that would reshape Europe, and left behind a legend that has endured for over 1,500 years. Legacy and historical significance. Imagine standing in a modern European city, perhaps Budapest or Vienna. Beneath the streets, buried under centuries of history, lie the echoes of thundering hoofbeats, the legacy of Attila and his Huns. Though their empire was short-lived, their impact resonates through the ages. First, consider Attila's role in the fall of the Western Roman Empire. While he didn't single-handedly bring down Rome, his campaigns were a crucial catalyst, accelerating processes of decay that had been underway for centuries. Picture the domino effect. Attila's invasions weakened Roman defenses, encouraged other barbarian groups to press their advantages, and shifted the balance of power that had maintained Roman hegemony. In your own life or career, have you encountered a situation where a single, dynamic force triggered a cascade of changes? Attila's story reminds us that sometimes external pressures can bring simmering issues to a boil, forcing rapid adaptation or collapse. The HUNNIC invasions also set in motion population movements that would reshape the ethnic and linguistic map of Europe. Imagine entire peoples on the move, fleeing before the HUNNIC advance or taking advantage of the chaos to seek new lands. The Europe that emerged from this period of migration was fundamentally different from what had come before, setting the stage for the medieval world. Attila's legacy extends beyond these direct historical impacts. He became a symbol of the unstoppable conqueror, of divine punishment, of the barbarian threat to civilization. His name entered the popular imagination, appearing in epic poems, operas, and even modern films and video games. Think about the historical figures who capture our imagination today. What is it about them that resonates with us? Attila's enduring legend speaks to our fascination with power, with the idea of the unstoppable force that changes the course of history. In military history, the Huns introduced new tactics and technologies that would influence warfare for centuries. Their mastery of mounted archery and their hit-and-run tactics provided a template for later nomadic conquerors, from the Magyars to the Mongols. Even today, military strategists study the HUNNIC way of war for lessons in mobility and psychological warfare. Culturally, the image of Attila has evolved over time, often reflecting the preoccupations of those telling his story. In some traditions, particularly Germanic ones, he was remembered not as a scourge, but as a great and just ruler. In Hungary, he's often seen as a national hero, a founder of nations. This evolution of Attila's image reminds us that history is not static, but constantly reinterpreted through the lens of the present. In your own life, how has your understanding of historical or personal events changed over time? Attila's varying portrayals show us that even the most fearsome reputations can be reinterpreted and reimagined. The rapid rise and fall of the HUNNIC Empire also offers enduring lessons in leadership and state-building. Attila's ability to unite diverse peoples under his banner was remarkable, but the swift collapse of his empire after his death highlights the dangers of over-reliance on a single, charismatic leader. Consider your own organization or community. Are there structures in place to ensure continuity and stability beyond any one individual's leadership? Attila's story serves as a cautionary tale about the importance of building sustainable systems. In the realm of diplomacy and international relations, Attila's interactions with both the Eastern and Western Roman empires provide case studies in negotiation, intimidation, and the balance of power. His ability to extract tributes and concessions through the threat of force, rather than actual conquest, demonstrates the power of perception in geopolitics. Linguistically, while the HUNNIC language is lost to us, many scholars believe it influenced the development of some Turkic and Germanic languages. Words thought to be of HUNNIC origin have found their way into various European languages, a subtle but enduring legacy of their presence. Finally, Attila and the Huns have left their mark on popular culture. From Wagner's opera, Attila, to modern video games and novels, the image of the fierce nomadic conqueror continues to captivate our imagination. This enduring fascination speaks to the power of Attila's story and its ability to resonate with themes of power, ambition, and the clash of civilizations that still feel relevant today. As we conclude our exploration of Attila and the Huns, we're left with a complex legacy. They were destroyers, yes, but also catalysts for change. They hastened the end of one era and helped usher in another. Their story reminds us of the impermanence of power, the far-reaching consequences of our actions, and the enduring impact one individual can have on the course of history. What lessons can you draw from Attila's story for your own life? How might his legacy inspire you to think differently about leadership, adaptability, or the power of perception? As with all great historical figures, Attila's true legacy lies not just in what he did, but in how his story continues to inform, inspire, and challenge us today. As we reach the end of this journey through the life and times of Attila the Hun, I hope you have gained not only historical knowledge, but also insights that you can apply to your own life and challenges. The story of Attila, though distant in time, offers timeless lessons on leadership, strategy, and the nature of power. Reflect on how you can apply some of these lessons to your own life. How can you cultivate the adaptability and resilience that allowed Attila and the Huns to thrive in a constantly changing world? In what ways can you build alliances and inspire loyalty, just as Attila did with his diverse empire? I invite you to consider, how has the story of Attila changed your perspective on leadership and power? What aspects of his tactics or strategies could you adapt to your own life or career? Remember, history is not just a collection of dates and facts. but a rich source of wisdom from which we can draw lessons to navigate our own challenges. By understanding figures like Attila, we gain insights into the forces that shape our world and our own potential to effect change. If you found this journey through history valuable, consider subscribing to our channel. Your support allows us to continue creating in-depth explorations of historical figures and events. We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What other historical figures would you like us to cover? How did Attila's story resonate with you? And if you are able and interested in further supporting our work, we deeply appreciate any donations. They help us continue bringing these important historical narratives to life. Before we conclude, I'd like to mention that we'll soon have a video on another great conqueror in history, Genghis Khan. If you were fascinated by the rise and fall of Attila's empire, you won't want to miss this next exploration of how another leader of the steppes changed the course of world history. Keep an eye out for the card that will appear on the screen for this upcoming video. Thank you for joining us on this journey through time. Until the next historical adventure.